In the Gita, somewhere, I don't know the verse number, it makes the phrase that out of 1,000, only one seeks God, and out of 1,000 who seek, only one finds God. When Master Yogananda quoted that phrase, he said, "Our percentage is higher," which was encouraging. He didn't say how much higher. Even 100% increase is only 2 out of 1,000. But the point is, you hear that and you think, why then would anyone try? It's not a very encouraging sort of statistic. I mean, whenever we have health issues or anything like that, especially if they're super challenging, you want to know what's the percentage likelihood of success. Swami Kriyananda commented about statistics. The statistic came out decades ago, but it was very alarming when it came out. It said that a woman over the age of 40 who was still single had a better chance of being killed by a terrorist than getting married again. That was a very discouraging comment, or encouraging, depending on which side of the coin you're on. But nonetheless, Swami's comment to it at the time was quite simply, there's no such thing as statistics. He said there's only individual karma. Doesn't matter what the statistics are, you will get in your life what your karma dictates, and what your karma dictates is what you need to become free. It's a very simple equation. It sounds really nice. Living it is a whole different experience, because when things come to us that are exactly right for us, that will help us to be free, we sometimes welcome them with open arms, but just as often we go into our bed and pull the covers over our head and hope that we can just outlast it. I mean, a lot of times, the phrase, this happened to me, it was very interesting here. I came to this community, to this area in 1980, Master's birthday in 1987. I had lived for 16 years at the Ananda community up in the mountains, Ananda village, even though my work for 5 years or so before then was actually mostly traveling and then working with the guests at the retreat. But I would do a little thing. I would come from the village to Sacramento. We had a house in San Francisco and Palo Alto. I did that. I would do classes like that. And so we were in the very unusual position of actually having been trained for a job that we were assigned, which was extremely unusual at that time at Ananda. Usually we're asked to do things you didn't have any idea how to do. But anyway, I thought that we'd come here, we'd start a community, then we'd go someplace else, we'd start another, and I just sort of anticipated this long, many faceted career, which many of my peers did have. They lived in multiple communities in the US and in India and in Europe. I lived in Ananda village and here. Period, end of story. And I didn't realize how that thought form was affecting me until there was I thought I could get over it, but it's got trouble today. Until there was a bit of a misunderstanding with Swami Kriyananda, and I thought he wanted to send us to New York, to the East Coast. He thought we were trying to get out of here and flee to the East Coast. We gradually sorted that out. But at the end of it, he said, I don't think you're ever going to live anywhere else. Just get used to it. And it was like, wow. But the most interesting part of it was, I realized how many aspects of my life I was not dealing with, because I would get to run away. It was just like deep in my subconscious that I really never had to deal with this person, this one, that I hadn't really figured out how to resolve the karma, that I didn't really have to deal with this that I didn't like, the corner of the garden where nothing would grow, the aspect of whatever it might be, many, many, many things that were all just in there, and I was waiting to be rescued. And I thought, instead of putting energy out to meet the karma, I would just hang on until the wave got small enough that I could claim victory. That's how Swami puts it. He said, karma comes in a wave like this, and it's usually bigger than we are. Because if it was the same size or smaller, we wouldn't even call it a wave. It would just come like that. Oh, my car didn't start this morning, so I called AAA. No big deal. Oh, I was in a terrible wreck, and now I don't have a car, and it was my fault, and, this is a big wave of karma. So the point of a big wave of karma is for us to get bigger, to be able to expand our consciousness, to be able to absorb whatever that energy is, all of life. Do you remember the game King of the Mountain? Did you ever play it when you were a child? The rules are really, really simple. There's some spot, which is usually a little higher, and the goal is for you to stay on that spot, and the object of everyone else is to pull you off of it. It's not subtle. Technique isn't really very much. It's just who gets to be king of the mountain, like that. Okay? And that's what our karma is. King of the mountain is to be aware and in tune that there are no errors in this world, that everything that comes to us is a gift from Divine Mother, because it's exactly what we need in order to expand our consciousness, become free, become blissful, become liberated, all the things that our hearts just long for, but we're confused. So she gets our attention by sending us something, this big wave of karma. Now, Swamiji says, if you can, and this is the phrase, if you can meet the karma at the crest, if you can get bigger than the wave, and this is what Jesus meant when he said, if someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek. He wasn't just asking to be beaten up by any thug who comes. It's that if something comes to you that you would think of that you don't want, instead of shrinking from it, step right into it. When Jesus himself was in the Garden of Gethsemane and the armed guards came and he was going to be arrested and tortured and crucified, and he knew that, they said, Jesus said to them, "Whom do you seek?" And then in the Bible it says he stepped forward. I mean, this is like, there's so many things in the Bible. What happens to us when something comes? And Jesus stepped forward. And that power was so great that the armed guards, as the Bible tells us, fell over backwards to the ground. Because Jesus did exactly the opposite of what the ego self wants to do. And that's what Swami is saying. Meet it at the crest. If you meet the karma at the crest, then you overcome it. Then it's gone, because it's no longer anything that can pull you off your position as the king of the mountain. Ha, ha, ha. I hold my position no matter what kind of karma comes. But what most of us do, what is our strong inclination to do, is because a wave will crest like that, it hits the shore and it gradually dissipates. So we just hide and wait. And until the energy of the karma, because time has passed, is smaller than we are. And then we think we've conquered it. But what we've done is we've just postponed it. God just said, okay, not yet, we'll try, like that. Outlasting it, waiting to be rescued, this is not freedom. Now, it's so interesting because the whole Bhagavad Gita is about war. Arjuna is the main warrior, and Master said that he himself was Arjuna and Krishna was Babaji. So this is really a story, not only the classic summation of all of the ancient teachings of India, but it's also a story about our masters on our path, which is relevant in this particular sense, which is the teaching of it is particularly apt for those who are trying to expand their consciousness by attunement with this ray. And so Arjuna and his brothers, the Pandavas, have tried in every possible way to make peace with their cousins, but their cousins are absolutely adamant, and finally it comes to war, and it's a war as to who gets to run the kingdom. And it's a literal war that took place, actually physically and all these things. That's the history of it. But it's symbolic. The kingdom, of course, is our own consciousness. This is king of the mountain. Who gets to be in charge? There's a wonderful phrase from a book written by Mickey Singer, who very very popular author now. He's a disciple of Master. I know him very lightly, so I respect what he did. But he has this magnificent image in his book, and he says, thoughts. There's always a voice going on in our head, always. And it's telling us when we're strong, when we're weak, when we're happy, when we're sad. Its fundamental thing is, what about me? What about me? Have you thought about me? What about me? Just always keeping us conscious of who I am and what's happening with me. And he said, and we naturally think, because that voice is always in our head, that that's me. He said, but there's two realities in your head. One is talking and one is listening. He said, so which one are you? Are you the one who's talking? Or are you the one who's listening? And then he goes on to describe, he said, that voice in your head is like a drunken roommate who's always just chattering away. But if your drunken roommate comes in and starts in again one more time, you know that you're the one that's listening and you don't always pay attention. Unless that drunken roommate is a little more sober and has something more helpful to say. But we're always getting just caught up, and we lose contact. And that's the symbology of the Pandavas and the Kauravas. The Pandavas are those divine qualities that will take us to freedom, and the Kauravas are all the things that we think we have to have, or else we'll be unhappy. I have to have money, I have to have health, I have to have respect, I have to have youth. I mean, everybody can make their own list. Swami talked about how Master would sometimes, when Swami asked him, one of the fellow disciples in the ashram when Swamiji was there had a dream in which he thought he dreamt that he was Master's disciple on the continent of Lemuria. Lemuria is considered to be an ancient civilization, which, true or not, it's reputed to be 80,000 years ago or something like that. I'm not an expert, but that's what Swami said. And so Swami heard that. He was a new disciple. He was horrified. 80,000 years ago? How long has this been going on? So Swami went to Master and said, have I been your disciple for 80,000 years? And Master said, it's been a long time, that's all I'll say. Like that. And then he said, desire for one thing or another just takes you away again and again and again. That's what we do. And one of the most fundamental desires, yes, we want this and this and this, but one of the most fundamental desires is waiting to be rescued, which is just, isn't there an easier way? Do I really have to do this? When Swamiji said, write your funeral and have it held in this temple because you're not going anywhere, all those years ago, I just had to look at it and I thought, what am I waiting for? And it's always now, even in another lifetime. It's so fun to think about. The now, the karma that I'm dealing with now, is the karma that I didn't deal with then, but then became now. But I think if I don't do it, it'll be the future, but it'll be now. Can you follow all that? What is the point? I love reincarnation. I love reincarnation for two reasons. The first reason I love it is because you can always postpone. If you don't get it right this time, you're going to get another chance at it. You don't have to die trying. You can just say, I'm not ready for that. Swami very kindly once, I was facing a difficult karma, and it suddenly was going away from me, just like that, which was both positive and negative, because I said to him, sir, but, I don't think it's resolved. Like, what? He said, well, maybe the karma's over. And just inside I went, yippee, like that. And he just let that thought just sit in the silence for 4 or 5 seconds. And then he said, but I don't think so. But he said, you've taken it as far as you can take it. So there's a realism to this also. You've taken it as far as you can take it. You have to put it down, grow in other ways. And don't worry, it'll come back. You can't force it. You have to also go with the flow on that. So that's nice, If I can't deal with it now, I get to deal with it later. And the other reason I like reincarnation is because there is no rescue. There is no rescue. Sooner or later, it has to be faced. So let me just at least do the best I can. When Swami talks about discipleship and the qualities that are required, first quality, courage. Isn't that interesting? Devotion is second. But the first is courage, because even devotion without courage won't help you. Well, it's better than nothing. Everything helps. We just face the right direction. It doesn't matter even if you're sitting on the ground weeping, at least try to face the right direction while you're doing it. Take what you can. Stretch up toward the top of the wave, even if it's just a little bit like that. Because that's what we have to do. When we were I say we because this was my first 10 years at Ananda village. I lived in the monastery we had. There was a group of, it varied, but 6 or 7 women was the core of it. And we had all come. We were in our early 20s. It was so much fun. This was the early 70s. The whole world, the USA was just coming apart, and I was right in the middle of it. And we were just leaving behind everything and doing something new, and we were with Swami Kriyananda. He was in his 40s. He was so dynamic. We were doing this wild, wonderful project with these Indian. It was so much fun. It was just so much fun. When Swami once said, reincarnation is because you long for something that you didn't have. I said, well, sir, I could do those first 10 years at Ananda again in a heartbeat. I said, it was heaven on earth. Oh, he said, that's different. He said, that's the longing for God, and that's what makes you free. But somewhere about year 4 or 5, I mentioned to you before that somewhere in Master's writings, he has the phrase, you have within you a portable paradise that you can access. And I start meditating. I think, I just made it up, 5 years. 5 years, door to the portable paradise will be open for me. I'll just sit down and walk into it. Suffice to say, it didn't happen. Let's just leave it like that. I just made that up. We make up the dopiest things. But the 5-year mark came. But I remember talking with my women, my sisters, my friends there. And this is the image we came up with. We saw the divine light. Just if we didn't see it literally, we saw it in our hearts. We were there with Swami. This was going to be so much fun. It was like a beautiful island, and it looked really close. So we all just threw ourselves into the water and started swimming like crazy. And we just didn't seem to get any closer. or maybe it was moving away. It was a little confusing, and we're getting a little tired, like here. And so we kind of stopped treading water, having a conversation. But the shore was now pretty far behind us. So we've moved out of who we were. We have not yet become what we're going to become. So we were treading water, discussing our options. And there were none. The courage to persevere. And God tricks you. Divine Mother is a tricky mother. She just does that. And she lures you in. She gets you going with something or another, and then you're too far from shore to go back, and you haven't quite made it. We made up a word for that. We called it the icky middle. You're just in the icky middle of your journey toward freedom. And there's nothing you can do. You just have to keep going on the faith, on the promise, and whatever experience you have. That's where your courage comes. Why am I really doing this? What part of me really knows why I'm here? This is absolute authenticity. And it's much more important to be absolutely sincere in what you're doing than it is to look good or to accomplish anything. But just where else could I go? That's what Peter said when Jesus asked him. The end of Jesus' life, when they were all just, running like rats from a sinking ship. Because Jesus was saying things like, drink my body and eat my body and drink my blood. Which is, I love this line in the Bible. I have a few favorite lines. Jesus says, "Eat my body, drink my blood," and the disciples say to one another, "This is a hard teaching." And I can just see it. Having had all those years with Swami, I can just see it. The master says something with all this power that they don't understand at all, and they just say, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." And then they walk outside the door and they say, "Good God, what have we gotten ourselves into?" And it says, "And from that point, many walked with him no more." And then Jesus says to Peter, "Will you also leave me?" Peter says, he doesn't say, "Oh, I understand. This is a symbolic representation of the communion which is going to happen at a later time, and you will set it at the last." Nothing. He says, "Where would I go?" That's what gives you courage. You're in the middle of a battlefield. Everybody's shooting. You have to run across that open area to get your soldiers to the other side. You can't just sit down and wait to be rescued. You just have to pick up and go, because this is who I am. This is what I've been trained for. It's what my life is about. That's where power comes from. It comes from that absolute, where else could I go? There's a verse, a couple of verses after what we read today, where Krishna says to Arjuna, he says, "Make war for me." This is Arjuna, having persuaded Krishna to bring him to the space between the two armies. And Arjuna says to Krishna, hey, I don't want to do this. This is a crummy idea. These are my own people. You don't have to fight against my grandfather. I mean, really, think about that. I have to pick up a big, heavy object and bash in the head of my own relatives, because the symbology is, but this is who I am, this is what I want, this is what I need. I have to actually pick up a weapon and fight against them? I don't want to do that. Can't we just kind of bring a lot of these things in with me and still get to heaven? Just I can bring just a little money, not a lot, just a little security, a little worldly success, a little admiration of friends, And the Lord says, no. He said, God alone. And that's what the whole Gita is. So Krishna then says to Arjuna, because this is the reassuring part, he says, "Make war for me." And there's a capital M, meaning fight on the side of the light. Make war for me if you would embrace eternal life, victory, and bliss. Make war, and don't wait to be rescued. Be the hero that just goes across. Last week when Sai Ganesh was standing where I'm standing speaking, Sai Ganesh, since many of us who are not born in India have Indian names, Sai Ganesh was genuinely raised in India and brings to the conversation many interesting aspects of the teaching because he was raised in it. And I'm probably going to garble this, so I'm going to just tell you what I took away from what he said. But he talked about this image that is a common way of trying to express it, where you have the goddess within you, and the goddess is hungry, and you're always feeding the goddess. I think he drew a different conclusion, but this is how I walked away from that. Because the subtlety that's so hard to grasp is that we are not separate from the divine, and that the whole divine call is actually coming from within us. We think it's that God's over there and that we have to go to it, because there's this gap in this is the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. You are one with the divine. Oh, no, not really, you say. Really, look at me after all. It's just unlikely. But then they just keep saying it to us over and over, because that darkness is all of these other things that we define ourselves by. But we have to find out from our own experience. Nobody ever learns just by being told. If you're ready to learn it and someone says it to you, you will then, those words will trigger it in you. But those same words can be spoken to many people, and only those who are ready to perceive the light. Otherwise, the darkness will just refuse to perceive the light. So I loved this image. I'm holding my belly like it's actually true. Like Divine Mother is inside of me, and she's hungry. And what she's really hungry for is she's hungry for our realization. Every mother wants her child to be successful and happy. And it's a very delicate dance, because often the child's idea of what successful and happy is quite different than what the parent's idea of successful and happy is. In my own parents' family, not one of their 3 children ever gave them any bragging rights at all. We all just went like that. And there was nothing much they could say until my father, who was always very good at putting a positive spin on things, he said, well, each of my children has done exactly what they felt to do, and they're very happy doing it. Which is actually massive bragging rights if you really want to think about it. Okay, but every mother, which is the symbol of compassionate, selfless love, that's what mother represents, absolute, unconditional self-sacrifice. Every mother wants eternal life, victory, and bliss for their children. Of course they do. So the mother lives inside of us, and she compels us. And she compels us either to seek God or to seek those experiences that will help us to realize that all we want is God. That's our karma. She's hungry. And so we feed her. We feed her ambition. We feed her longing for love. We feed her laziness. We feed her the desire to be rescued. All of those things. We feed her the desire to be compassionate and to be helpful, to be noble, to be good. And she's always hungry. We're always being compelled forward, either compelled toward the light or away from it. But if we say, I want this, then she becomes hungry for this. She becomes hungry that we go out and have that experience, have that karma, and learn to meet it at the crest. Until finally, that hunger, which is our hunger, that hunger for eternal life, for victory, and for bliss, and all that comes with it, until that hunger is satisfied. And that's when the light shines in the darkness, but the darkness is banished by that light. Inevitable, that's our destiny. If we don't do it now, we're going to have to do it now then. So why not? We had a wonderful satsang with Swamiji once many years ago. He went into a very high state of bliss. This was back in those early years. He looked out at, I'm going like this, but it was actually like this. It was a very small room, 30 of us at the most. He said so sweetly, "You're going to get it right sooner or later," he said. "Why waste a few million years?" So, why waste a few million years, my friends? God bless you.